Excellent. Hello, everybody, and welcome to CubeWise Innovation Week 2025, Day 3. My name is James Downey, and it's great to be here again with you all as we dive deep today into planning analytics in an AI-enabled universe. This is going to be a fantastic session and really looking forward to, as I said, kind of diving deep into more of the Gen AI aspects as it relates to this AI conversation with planning analytics. So again, thank you very much for being here, and please kind of be using the chat if you have some questions there, and we'll do our best to kind of get to those. We'll also be sharing a bunch of links as we kind of go through today's session to a number of our YouTube pages and other kind of reference documents as well, to just kind of help your kind of understanding and upskilling on all these good things and as we move forward. And today I have Stephen Waterbury, who will be joining us, who is with us, and we'll be presenting hands-on keyboard, some of the great work that he and the engineering team at CubeWise have been working on in the Gen AI space. So looking forward to him joining the conversation in a second. And we have Dean Watts, who was with us yesterday as well, who was presenting on Applico UX and workspace excellence. So Dean is joining us as well. Great to see you again. And Jason Apwa is joining us as well, who was on yesterday's webinar, and also be kind of diving deep into this discussion around the use of Gen AI and with planning analytics. So again, just as a quick recap about the week. So on Monday, we had that chat with Tracy Pepe and Rose Morgan and Andrea Ludwig from the CubeWise team, where we talked about the different kind of deployment options on IBM Cloud, whether it's on IBM Cloud infrastructure. So we call that planning analytics on cloud. Or deploying on PA SaaS version 12 on the hyperscalers, whether it's on AWS or Microsoft, and kind of looking to segment and kind of understand, what is the right pathway forward for different customers. And if you're, depending on your maturity, your size, your complexity, what is the appropriate deployment method if you're kind of looking to kind of go on IBM Cloud or on the hyperscalers there in terms of a cloud option from IBM. What is the right approach? So that was a really useful session there with Tracy as we kind of tried to have a balanced discussion about what is the right fit for purpose approach. And then yesterday we had that discussion where we wanted to kind of talk about the importance of visual excellence and kind of having efficient design as a way to improve user trust and adoption. And also from my side of things, I've worked in this space for many years. You see some of these fabulous models that are out there that that are complex with great dimensionality and hierarchies and attributes and fantastic rules and TIs. And they are complex because you're trying to you're managing and you're wrangling complex data and things of that nature. But how do you kind of remove that complexity for the end user? The end user doesn't necessarily need to feel that complexity. And so how do you have a user experience that assists them to have an efficient, productive workflow process, efficient design that's easy to use, that's consistent? That was a kind of big thing that we've seen over the years. Consistent design of your user experience is key. And also trying to bring it forward as much as possible in your project life cycles. The sooner you can kind of start talking about the design of your front end, whether it's using the corporate colors, the design palettes, the charting options, the navigational options, all those things, bring that conversation forward, because that will actually kind of, I think in my experience, bring time back in terms of user acceptance testing, documentation and just the general acceptance of the solution, right? Because, again, user adoption is such an important metric in terms of how successful your app is. And of course, today we're talking about AI, Gen AI specifically enabled apps here with planning analytics, and we're going to bring the team in a second. And then, tomorrow we're going to be talking about probably one of my favorite topics, to be fair, and that is high performance, high performance apps, and how do we, revisit the importance of high performing applications. What is in some of the important things, architectural advancements that have happened over the while, and how that can impact positively, your more advanced capabilities in terms of, things like Rush TI or, advanced multi-threading. Yeah. So when we're kind of talking about some of these multi-threading, we are talking about some of the more advanced topics here that do require some, quote unquote, some kind of engineering skills, to kind of move data at scale, to reduce those locking contentions, and to kind of, to be efficient, not kind of like duplicating data, incredibly. So again, looking at those things, and also importantly, looking at testing. CubeWise has done a lot of innovation around this recently as it relates to part of our ARC tool set, and Pulse as it relates to unit testing. And we're kind of marching towards how do we have more, a more automated, more IT-esque testing of your code, of your reconciliations, and of your performance. As we want to scale planning analytics into the enterprise, we need to do better on, the testing of our code in a more programmatical sense. So that's going to be with Steve and the engineering team here at CubeWise in the US. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And then to wrap up the week, we're going to have Marius and some of the engineers on the call as we're going to launch Atmosphere, which is going to be, and Marius is particularly excited about this, and you might have seen some LinkedIn posts on this the last few weeks. This is the kind of, in a sense, a bit of an evolution of TM1py, and again, we want to kind of share with you where this is going. Atmosphere has been incubated here in the US over the last year or so as a product innovation, and it's been successful. And now it's kind of graduating into a CubeWise Code product formally, and then kind of being globally launched on Friday. And Atmosphere, again, we're wanting to, for those of you on the call and been with Planning Analytics for a while, answering that kind of pre-built connector question, and how do we kind of have pre-built connectors to effectively countless amounts of cloud data sources, as an example. And how do we do that? How do you manage the security keys? How do you manage the performance of that? Some of these things can be quite complex, and we're wanting to kind of bring to market a solution here which is pretty compelling. Okay. Seems like my camera is kind of going in and out there, so apologies if the focus on my camera is being a bit playing up a bit. Okay. So that's kind of the week, and we're very excited about that. And I guess kind of more generally, kind of from the year ahead side of things, if you are, you've got Think coming up in Boston. For those of you who are in the more US, North America based, you've got Think in Boston in May, and the CubeWise team will be there. So if you are going to be there as well, please reach out and let's meet. It'd be great to see you there. Additionally, the CubeWise team will be at Tech Exchange, which will this year be in Orlando in October, and we'll be there again with sizable numbers as we were last year. We definitely, I think, about like 15 of us there at Tech Exchange last year, and it was great. We had a number of presentations, we had a number of networking sessions, and we also had the T1 World Championships at Tech Exchange last year, which we'll be doing again this year, which is a great bit of fun and a great opportunity for people who know TM1 at the detailed level, to have a bit of fun competition. Think of it like the best esports event ever for TM1 is kind of how we talk about it. So yeah, it's going to be a busy year. It's an exciting year. And again, thanks for everyone for joining today's session. So yeah, as I said, this recording will be sent out following today's webinar, and it'll also be up on our YouTube pages very shortly. Okay, Jason, enough of a plug for the week and the year ahead, but let's kind of get into this, right? So the Gen AI conversation, I know in particular for yourself, right? You have a number of customers that are definitely kind of actively been talking to you about this for good six plus months now, as it relates to the Gen AI and their appetite for it. And from your side of things, why is it valuable? Like, can you help set it up for the audience, like what we're talking about here today, as it relates to the value of the Gen AI and the differentiating it between the traditional AI and the Gen AI kind of narrative, and why we're talking about it today?
Yep, thanks, James. Jason Applewhite here, one of the technical account managers with CubeWise, based in the New York City area. So to me, generally, AI refers to software or systems that are built with the intent to mimic human functions like learning, reasoning, problem solving, and so on and so forth. I believe it's valuable because ultimately it helps augment decision making through understandings that come out of data, right? And we know what the limitations are when it comes to a lot of data and humans being able to digest that, right? And I also want to emphasize the word augment, because it really fills in the gaps that are present from those human limitations. An important note that you brought up, IBM has solutions within the watsonx platform that covers both traditional machine learning, which if some of you are familiar with that, it's SPSS modeler, auto AI, decision optimization. And watsonx platform also covers foundation models, so the generative AI sort of hemisphere of artificial intelligence. So it's not just a library of foundation models, it's also tools within the platform that help you basically get better performance and sort of monitor what you're building with those tools. So that's really what we're going to be focused on today. And I'll pass the mic briefly to Dean, maybe to talk about, if any of you were on yesterday's call when we spoke about our project that we had with the US Navy, we actually used both. We used traditional machine learning and generative AI for that project. Dean, do you want to maybe touch on a handful of use cases that we used those two techniques for?
Sure. Thanks, Jay. Dean Watts here, the sales engineer at CubeWise. Yes, the Navy project was quite interesting in that the variables that they had involved with regards to supplying their ships with food were varied. Many of the assumptions were mostly anecdotal. Somewhat based on experience, but for example, how often will people partake of a particular recipe or a meal that's being served? And so with our algorithms and the work that we did with them, we were able to, one, reveal a lot of information with regards to those assumptions, especially with regards to how you might say off they were, but also we're able to come up with some results that they were actually able to take the information out on a test deployment, and to verify that yes, the AI algorithms that we were using and the approaches that we were taking to it were actually producing the appropriate results, that the outcomes were very close to what we were predicting. So again, it's one of those opportunities where not only did you deal with a very complex subject, but you also had a good opportunity to test the results to see, hey, did this actually work?
Mm-hmm. And also there's the other thing we used generative AI for, and I'll pass the mic to Steve to kind of talk about a little bit on, from your perspective, Steve, why AI is important to planning analytics users. But the other use case that we used Gen AI for at the Navy was to actually impute missing data. Do you want to maybe give a 30-second brief on that, Steve?
Yeah, so one of the things we did, right, as you can imagine, when you have food on ships, is you have to make that and you have recipes, but those recipes aren't always complete. And so we were able to use Gen AI to be able to understand the natural language of descriptions of recipes and ingredients, to be able to pull that information out and construct recipes that met the needs of sailors on particular vessels with the ingredients that were on board, without necessarily having all of the information discreetly provided to us, right? So we could fill in the gaps a bit, and make it easier to really manage some of those the missing data points, and, as you said, impute some of the things that we were missing.
Mm-hmm. So Steve, before you get to showing some stuff, because I know that's why everybody's here, I want to briefly touch on the importance of Gen AI to planning analytics users, right? So historically, I think traditional AI aimed to improve things like accuracy of forecasts and the timeliness of forecasts, solve complex optimization problems and things like that. I think now with Gen AI, there's a lot more value there, and much more apparent value that customers already have use cases for, and the technology kind of had to catch up in a way. And we'll talk about some of those use cases, Steve, as you're presenting. But generally, the promise of Gen AI when it comes to planning analytics is really anything that the end user is effectively communicating with the application. The way you're interacting with the application is basically the most natural way you can think of, which is by natural language, right? Typing in something. So with that, I'm going to stop speaking and let you show some impressive stuff.
And as Steve kind of shares his screen here, so I think it's also kind of helpful to, I guess, as we kind of further differentiate what we're going to be talking about here today, right? So we're going to have some screens here where you're going to be seeing, primarily like IBM technology, and as Steve here, and I'll kind of pass it here across, right? So, the Planning Analytics AI assistant is obviously kind of part of Workspace, and it's an add-on for a lot of folks. And we're going to be touching on that as we go through the discussion. But what we're really going to be focusing on, and Steve, I want you to kind of help us double down on this, right? We're going beyond that. We're going to looking at more, I guess we can call it out, more advanced, enterprise-ready, scalable options for integrating planning analytics with Watson X. Okay, and kind of more of an enterprise approach to solving this, to addressing the Gen AI outcomes that you might be looking at exploring. So, while the Planning Analytics AI system does have some areas that are interesting around some of the chart analytics that we'll talk about shortly, when we're talking about this particular use case here, this is where we want to go outside of the Planning Analytics box into the kind of IBM ecosystem as we kind of present this and kind of show the power of this, because this stuff is this is pretty impressive stuff. So I don't know, Steve, you want to just revisit as you're going to move forward, help kind of share a bit on that too, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to start here, and I've got a screen here, and it looks kind of blend. I'll walk you through it in just a second. But kind of our approach here, as we're sort of going after the Gen AI, I'll call it problem, right? Kind of relates to something you were talking about earlier, James, which is making a user experience that excels for your users, right? You guys talked about that in the call yesterday, but really, right, as Jason alluded to, the most natural way for us to be able to actually engage with each other is through, natural language typing and talking and et cetera, right? So one of the things we wanted to try and get at is we wanted to try and begin to democratize your planning analytics data through natural language. So what I've got here is I've actually got an interface that we've developed here that's going to actually allow me to talk to my data. So I'll show you guys that now, and I'll start typing in here, and I'll say analyze my income statement. I'll press enter. And what this is doing live is this is actually going out, it's pulling data out of my TM1 model, passing this up to Watson X. Watson X is a platform that's inferring a LLM known as Granite 3.1, which is an IBM model. It doesn't have to be Granite 3.1. That's just the one that we happen to be using. And what it's going to do is it's going to take that data. It's going to take the query that I've entered here around analyzing my income statement, and then it's going to spit back the result. And then we'll see what it says and go from there in just a second.
So Steve, right now, are you in Planning Analytics or not in Planning Analytics with this interface?
In this particular case, I am not in Planning Analytics, but I'm interacting with Planning Analytics. What you see here is that it's actually taken the data that I have here, and it's spit it out for the 2023 data, and it's giving me some of the details here around what exactly is going on here directly from it. And then at the bottom here, I get this really cool summarized statement around what exactly is happening within the categories here.
And this isn't something that you this came directly from Watson X. So you didn't pre-cache this or anything like that. This is all coming, this is live generated by Watson X.
Exactly right. I mean, if I were to try and go and do this, right, sort of, as you mentioned earlier, augmenting the capabilities of humans, if I were to go and actually start to try and type this up and build this up, right, manually, can you imagine how long that would have taken me to do manually, right? So by leveraging the machine and leveraging the AI that's there and leveraging Watson X and the LLMs that we have available to us, we're able to live generate and live interact with the data, right? So I can come in here and I can say, give me the details for 2023, and we'll see what it comes back to here and spins back to me.
Interesting.
Yep.
So by the way, the fact that this interface isn't in Planning Analytics, it can be, I'm assuming it can be in Planning Analytics, but the fact that this is not, I think is very important, because what I've heard from speaking with customers is that Gen AI is part of a broader organizational strategy, right? So while it's good to have an interface in Workspace as an example, you need to have the ability to expose it in other areas, for example, through Teams integration or like an intranet site. So I think this is a critical feature. So please, I'm sure people are pleased to see this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look here, right? And so by me just querying the data, right, I didn't have to tell it to go and get something else. It's smart enough to come in here and take the data that I had before and then restrictive based on what I've asked it to do over here. Obviously, the formatting and some of the things that are here, are customizable to you and can be provided for you, right? But that's exactly what it's doing. It's going out to your planning analytics cubes, pulling the data out, sending it up, and doing that very, very quickly. And again, to your point, doesn't have to be directly within planning analytics. Back to what I said at the beginning, right? Democratizing your data here, right?
And that's a really good point, because in this space, we're seeing a lot of customers out there who, the Gen AI kind of initiatives, exist throughout the enterprise. Yeah, so we need to kind of, from a planning analytics perspective, need to work within maybe a broader ecosystem or an ecosystem approach across the organization. So this is where, as you said, kind of having this widget, effectively a chat widget, as in this example, exposed outside of planning analytics, but you've got planning analytics data. It's quite compelling when you kind of look across the enterprise and how maybe your organization is approaching this, maybe with other tools as well, and because you're integrating with those and providing a high quality outcome. And I guess you've seen that in a number of proof of concepts recently, Steve, as well, from your side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll actually show. So there's a concept in AI, James, around RAG, retrieval augmented generation, right? And so really what that's doing is that's allowing you to take things from outside of planning analytics and provide them in context within your planning analytics data in order to be able to inform what you're doing, right? But you don't have to do it that way. The other thing that you can do is you can leverage RAG to facilitate your prompt engineering approach that you have for your AI solution. So I can show you guys something like that if you're interested in actually seeing the something that uses that RAG concept. So I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding, so we'll jump into that. I'll show you this first. Yeah, exactly. I'll show you this first in Python, right? So this is a Python script that I have here, and this is based on a tool or a proof of concept that we built. And what this is going to do is this is going to go out, and based on a question I'm going to ask, it's going to generate an MDX statement related to the question that I'm asking. So if I run this, as it comes up here and it brings up my pop-up here and starts itself up, what you're going to see here is a couple of different things. It's going to ask me to enter a question. So here's my question, right? And then I'm going to say, show me the P&L details for 2024. Okay. And when I click OK here, I want you to keep an eye down here on this this console window right here, and I'll show you what's happening. So if I click OK, it's going to start, and now it's going to run. What you'll see is it's spitting out MDX, right? So MDX is obviously the core, the underlying query logic for the background in planning analytics that you can generate all of your views for. And if I scroll here and I go up a little bit here, it's generated an MDX statement. But the question is, like, how does it know how to generate this, right? That's what everybody wants to know. What I have, if you go up, is I have collections of pairs here around questions that have been asked, and then the corresponding query to answer that question. This is stored, these query question pairs are stored in a RAG database, in a vector database that we have. And so when I go and I actually go to ask my question, I do a search based on the similarity of what I'm asking to other questions that have been asked, pull that data out, and then compare, similar type MDX in order to be able to generate that and sort of create a new MDX based on things that have been done in the past, essentially learning from what we've done in the past.
But Steve, question on that. Sorry, Dean, if you had a, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to ask, basically, you can imagine that from any given question, the MDX could vary widely.
Yep.
How do you ensure that the system is actually generating valid MDX?
So in this case, and I'll actually show you how I started this so that you can sort of see where I began, right? But in this case, because I know that these MDXs worked, and I've actually preceded this RAG data in there, I know that all of these work, and then I can go and test it using TM1py to actually confirm within the Python that I'm writing here and that I'm scripting to actually execute that and build out a valid test case to say, does this work or does it not? If it doesn't, then you can go down some other things using MDXpy or other tools in order to be able to build out valid MDXs that will then reseed your training data so that the AI continues to learn effectively from how your users are interacting with the model.
Interesting. So that actually answers one of my next questions, which is, you're using watsonx. but why are you using Watson X? And yeah, what are some of the reasons why Watson X was selected here as the platform?
So the biggest reason why I use Watson X is because Watson X, being a platform, allows me to use any number of LLMs, right? So it's not a single LLM. It's kind of like, you have a whole like case of LLMs that you can choose from. And in some cases, if you want to, you can bring your own LLM to Watson X. So what it allows me to do is allows me to use one interface and then configure the LLM that I want to use for my particular use case. Maybe you, within your overall AI strategy as an organization, are on OpenAI. Maybe you're on Mistral or Meta or whatever it happens to be. Watson X allows you to choose and bring your own foundational model in order to be able to infer it from this. And so by using, a specific platform like this, as opposed to specifically going against, OpenAI's, cloud-based APIs, it allows me to kind of not have to pick now who's going to win the AI wars, so to speak, right? I can be open to whatever the end result is and be able to sort of adapt as the technology changes and as we sort of discover who in the ecosystem is going to come out ahead.
And can I just jump
Steve,
into a question?
did you? Oh, go ahead,
Go for it, Dean. Please, please go for it.
I was just going to say, following up on a question that just came through in the chat. With this example, did you find that you had to train the model in MDX, or did that come as part of the language model that you were using?
So I did not train the model in MDX. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a RAG-based prompt engineering approach. The reason that I'm doing that, because it's actually a very good question, models are very expensive to train. And I, James, maybe you'd allow me to go and train my own model, but I don't think that we have the budget in the engineering department to do that. So what this allows me to do is it allows me to leverage the models that are out there. Granite 3 is particularly, and I kind of chose that because Granite 3 is an IBM model, and I know that it's had some training on TM1 related information. I will tell you, I have also run this against ChatGPT. I think it was 4.0. With pretty good success as well. I haven't gone through the same level of depths of testing as I have with Granite to be able to speak to that. But no, I did not have to go and train the entire model. I can go and build out a RAG database, in this case using OpenSearch, to be able to go and build and inform the prompts that I'm generating through when I infer the model directly.
Maybe a quick question there, and nice comment there, Adam, in the chat. That's pretty funny. Is just a kind of question. So he talks about Granite, right? So you were talking to Hubert at Tech Exchange in October about this. A few of us were, which was great. Let's double down on that about you were chatting with Hubert Heikers, the chief Team 1 server architect, who a lot of you on the call definitely know, great guy. We've kind of also explored taking pulse data. Yeah, I guess for a lot of customers who are out there who are using Pulse, or if you're familiar with Pulse, how we're kind of using that to track performance metrics and application lifecycle components as well. Yeah. We're taking some of that great rich Pulse data and putting into LLMs to kind of start inferring and making kind of further AI generated recommendations during like a system analysis or a health check. But maybe just on the Granite specific, when you were talking to Hubert, do you want to just share a bit about that further, please?
Yeah, so when we were at Tech Exchange this past year, Granite had just come out. Granite 3, I shouldn't say Granite just came out, but Granite 3 had just come out. And so we were talking about it over dinner one night there, and he had mentioned that when they were talking about training the LLM, he had them include TI rules, planning analytics syntax within the training corpus that they used for that, right? Now it's one portion of it. Granite has a lot of other things in there, but that to me told me that okay, there's probably some intricacies or some details that Granite will be able to pick up around TM1 models, right? And so you mentioned Pulse in there as well. So one of the things I did, and I don't have it to show today, but I was actually able to go and run rules in TI through Granite in order to be able to get some understanding and auto document some of what I was doing in rules in TI for a project of mine by using Granite 3.1 to be able to be the engine to do that. One other note sort of on that pulse thing. I was waiting for one of you to ask me why OpenSearch, right? I mentioned OpenSearch as this database that's there as the vector database I'm using for the RAG. And actually I chose that specifically because that is the database and the vector technology that is used within the Pulse Explorer component. So one of the things that we at CubeWise are doing, right, relative to the planning analytics world here, is beginning to take, and it's one of the things that's on the engineering docket here. Take your planning analytics model in details, right? Your dimensions, your cube structure, all that stuff, out of Pulse and out of the existing structure that you have within your Pulse application, and use that as a portion of the RAG component to be able to push back into your prompts that you're using to infer whatever your LLM happens to be. The goal there being, back to an earlier question, right? How do you know that the MDX is working? How do you know what element it's going to do, right? Go out and generate the MDX based on the understanding and the documentation that Pulse has of your model, and pushing that back into your LLM inference to be able to get better and better results as you go.
And that's a really good point. Maybe Dan, you want to go in a second here, touch on also, that as this relates to stepping out further, from a CubeWise code perspective, what we're seeing around some of the Pulse and Arc tools. But there's a good question here from Alex, right? And I think this refers to the proof of concept that we're kind of currently doing with a very large bank up in New York, where their senior executive CFO wants to be able to go into a chat widget and ask a question, and then be presented back with an answer, which can be a combination, maybe like planning analytics data and other data, as an example, in a chart format. Yeah. So this is a proof of concept we're kind of currently working on. And I know maybe Steve and to kind of share a little bit on that for us in a second. But I guess before you kind of get to that, you saw that kind of chat bot that Steve was kind of referring to, showing before. And maybe you want to bring that back on screen there, Steve, if you could. For a lot of us who been in this space for a while, this is really interesting. But then you want to be able to as well, produce your monthly PowerPoint decks. Yeah, so you can kind of if you kind of start thinking and taking this a bit forward, this is just a chat interface here to kind of ask these questions and an embedded widget. But where do we go next here? Is clearly you can start to kind of put together your first draft, basically a junior analyst version of your monthly PowerPoint decks. For your executive, for your month-end close, which includes charts and narrative and things like that. For those of you who've used Cognos Disclosure Management in years gone by, similar type of outcome. How do you kind of auto-generate your first draft of your monthly decks? But yeah, Steve, back to you here. What have you got on screen here?
Yeah, so on that one note you said, right, just to not to get too far ahead of myself, but actually exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if I told you this yet, but the engineering team is actually working on generating PowerPoints out of your planning analytics data using AI. So it's something that's coming in the near future from CubeWise here. So I saw in the chat here there was a comment around the Planning Analytics AI assistant, and so I'll throw this to Dean to sort of talk about that in just a second and maybe contrast this a little bit, right? But I showed you before, and it was just sort of a hovering window there, right, of what's going on within your interface. But because we created our own chat bot, so to speak, or our own chat interface, I can embed it in Planning Analytics workspace, right? So this doesn't have to necessarily be something that exists entirely separately. It can be, but it allows you to leverage your Planning Analytics data from anywhere that you can hit a URL. So in this case, in Planning Analytics workspace. And I don't know, Dean, if you want to talk a little bit about because I'm not as familiar with it, the PA assistant and some of the comparisons and contrast between what we're doing here and the PA assistant.
Yeah, sure. Yes, as many are starting to see with Planning Analytics version 12, you now have the capability to for a separate license utilize their Planning Analytics AI tool, PA Assistant, and our testing of it so far has yielded several interesting insights. One, we're rather intrigued by the chart insights rule, where you can pull up a chart and then have it analyze the results, and this seems to work fairly well. As James mentioned, it kind of presents a junior analyst result in terms of some basic comparisons. But where we find some less satisfactory results is, for example, in the chat itself, it requires a very structured syntax. You cannot just, as Steve showed you, analyze this. It just won't work, and with that kind of flexibility. In addition, it doesn't seem to give you much with regards to modification and really know how do I extend this or use this a little bit further. It's like, well, this is the first foray. As with everything else, PAW itself, we all know, is much better than it used to be. I'm sure this will evolve over time, but there's some good points to it that we can see. But I think in terms of producing a result, like you just saw here, the planning analytics assistant just isn't there quite yet.
And Jason, you're kind of like, and thanks for that, Dean. And to kind of step onto that a bit further, right? So, there's some really good questions about the differentiation, between the PA AI assistant and Watson X and this chatbot, right? So what you see up on screen here is not the PA AI assistant that you can kind of comes out of the box with Planning Analytics as part of like an extra add-on license. This is kind of a widget which could be embedded potentially in like an Applica UX front end, or maybe you've got a custom web app that you have financial data in there and other kind of data sets. And you want to kind of embed this widget into those kind of data sets there. So I think it's really important here to kind of differentiate. While the PA assistant has some interesting aspects around some of its chart analytics, and as I said, it kind of like junior analyst kind of review of those answers. It's reasonable. It is lots of room for improvement in terms of its chatbot functionality. Okay, and while when you start kind of actually going into a more of an enterprise approach that does require a bit more integration, clearly, you're starting to get better answers, more scalable answers into more foundational models and things like that. And Jason's put some really good answers there in the chat. It steps that out a bit further. I don't know, Jason, do you want to kind of mention that? Because I know you've spent a bit of time on this over the last while, and it is a really important kind of talking point.
Yeah, I think the reason why I decided to put that in the chat is because I think historically, like with traditional machine learning techniques as an example, justifying the return on an investment typically was hard because a project was focused on like a use case or like a small set of use cases. But with Gen AI, it's much more open. So it's much more open. And I think the with traditional machine learning, the thought was that the resources that you need to actually move forward with those projects required like expensive skill sets. And I think with Gen AI, that's really no longer the case. Probably when you get to like training models, which with the Watson X platform and the tools that you're provided, don't really require that. You don't really require that, and therefore you don't need like a data scientist or something like this. That all means is that this is a lot more accessible to organizations, right? So this is just like the start. The list that I put in the chat window is just a start. But I think at least maybe half of these would apply to many of the people that are on the call right now.
Appreciate that. Okay, so again, and there's some really good questions there around, can we use this for root cause analysis, not just the why? So I don't know, maybe Steve, back to you, kind of like explaining what you've got on the screen and some of these kind of extra really interesting parts here, because this is pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, so there's a ton of use cases that we can talk about relative to generative AI, right? So this is obviously one of them, and really exposing and providing that interface for users to be able to go and deploy it to access your data and sort of, get the data that they need at their fingertips. I think you posted some of the YouTube videos out there, James, and one of the ones that we did in there was actually the ability to be able to generate out, for example, consolidated commentary using Gen AI, right? Taking the commentary that you have at the detailed level and bringing it up to the top level, based on what your users might have done at their business line items. Same thing, transactional analysis or sort of anything that has context that can be provided to it that may provide more than just a budget is less than actuals, right? Why? Right? The why is really the thing that you want to be able to get into. And I think, kind of what Dean was talking to there, right? The advantage to doing something like this is it allows you to embed the things that may uncover the why into your analysis, whether it's root cause analysis, whether it's income statement data, whether it's something else. what we're looking at right here, right, is just simply, and I think somebody asked about security, right, or preventing security access within your model, right? Because I'm within PA, right, and you can see here, I'm logged in as admin, and I'm talking to the AI as admin. This would be your user, and therefore the security model that you have within Planning Analytics would be respected. So therefore, your users wouldn't necessarily be able to ask about data that is security related, or that they don't have security rights to. So you can deploy this as a component of your overall PA model. You can deploy it as a component of a broader AI strategy, and you can even use the techniques that we're doing here from RAG and inferring your AI model, inferring Watson, to be able to apply other use cases within your planning analytics data.
Nice. Okay. And I think that's some really kind of like excellent kind of like use cases there. And I did put some of the links that your conversation with Nick Renat that you did last year with Andrew Layton on there. And there's a bunch of other kind of really good, interesting webinars or presentations that you did with Andrew there around some of the Watson X. I know you also Andrew did a Chat GPT integration YouTube a presentation as well. So some further learnings there. Okay, so in terms of kind of like, and just kind of being mindful where we are on the time here, right? So, there's a lot kind of like we're kind of sharing here about, the art of the possible. Yeah. And a lot of this kind of, and how to start with this. So I guess maybe Steve and Jason, like, how would you, how would you kind of like suggest that customers start kind of taking that first step, as it relates to, further exploring some of these capabilities? There's the IBM Cloud subscriptions that they can get, and then there's also kind of like just generally how we approach proof of concepts. So I don't know, Jason, you want to maybe just like step out, like how do customers start here in your recommendation?
Yeah, so I would challenge customers to get a pulse internally of what people are looking for. So it's actually Steve's idea. So like doing things like taking an internal poll to identify, say, like the top 3 use cases. And I think once you start to collect that information, certain use cases will sort of bubble to the top, and you'll be able to begin prioritizing and get buy-in on those things. I don't know, Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly where you want to start, right? You want to try and start with, all right, do I have the pieces out there to be able to put together something and get, something somebody asked about hallucinations in the past, right? Do I have the data out there to support getting an accurate response from my AI or an AI solution? Once you're there, once you have questions that you can ask and you think you have some data, you can actually go onto Watson X and begin playing around with it, which is, I can show you how I did it for the MDX generator thing, where I started, if you want to see that.
Yeah, let's see that. And so as you're pulling this up, I want to touch on something you had mentioned, the accessibility. Mm-hmm. So I think another one of the barriers for doing anything AI in the past was just accessibility to the software. So for example, the time spent just like installing and configuring software was a huge barrier. And so with Watson X SaaS, that doesn't exist anymore, that sort of barrier. And there's different tiers of Watson X that organizations could get. So like today, you could go on the Watson X platform and you get a free account and start playing around with it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first place I would start is exactly where I'm at. So this is the Watson X Prompt Studio. So what this is allowing you to do is it's allowing you to choose an AI, a foundation model for you to use, which is up here, and you can choose any sort of one. There's a bunch of them that are out there. If you choose, you can bring your own. And then what you can begin doing, and this is actually the one that I used in order to build out the first part of that inference and the MDX generation stuff that I showed, is what I did is I said, all right, here's what I want you to do, right? I want the AI to do this. And then I took this first one and I said, all right, show me the full year P&L. And I actually just created a view in my cube that had this MDX and I pulled it out of workspace, right? Then I went down here to the bottom and I said, ask the next question. I clicked generate and it got it wrong, right? And so then I changed the MDX and pushed the question up And very quickly, right, I built out this collection, this corpus, so to speak, of context that supports what I was trying to do here. And I adjusted these things a little bit each time and asked slight variations of the question until I started getting consistent and usable results. So now I can come in, right, and I can say, show me the 2024 P&L details. I can click generate here. And what you're going to see is it will start generating an MDX statement out here on the side, right? And so then this will let me go and begin actually building out and getting a consistent and standardized approach for my prompt engineering in order to be able to infer it. So within, a few hours time, you can come in and start seeing, do I have the data? Do I have the structure in place to be able to refine this?
Steve, this sort of reiterates the value of Watson X, because it's a platform for development, testing, deployment, and monitoring.
Yep.
Whereas, other vendors might not have that whole tool set. In addition to this, like if I were to ask you, Steve, if I were to give you a use case for Gen AI, I'm pretty confident you wouldn't be able to tell me which LLM you would use, right? It's kind of like you have to have a platform, or it's beneficial to have a platform where you have a library of LLMs, and then within the platform, you can also test the performance of those LLMs, so you can basically come up with the best outcome for your end users. And I think that is a huge plus for the Watson X platform.
I want to say something quickly. Alex, you're spot on in your statement. And if you notice this, the reason that it did that is because this is bad. The data I passed into it in this particular case is not correct. So you are spot on, and that is a great catch. I was hoping somebody would catch that.
Yeah, nicely done. And I guess again, kind of stepping in here, you could see that we're going to differentiate between the Planning Analytics AI assistant versus Watson X. We're kind of Planning Analytics AI assistant has its capabilities, within Workspace. Once we're going to step into the Watson X platform, as it says, it's a platform approach. There's the prompt labs, the foundational models, all of that, those things there. We are approaching more of an enterprise scalable approach to addressing the Gen AI use case outcomes. So you will simply, get better results. As we've kind of been exploring with several customers now, in terms of proof of concepts and things like that, there's learnings here right now. Yeah, there are organizations who are wanting to be at the cutting edge of innovation and who are wanting to adopt these approaches more rapidly than others. There's just different appetites across different segments in the US in particular. But there's definitely a growing appetite across certain segments, like for example in the banking. Banking customers up in the Northeast just seems to have a bit more of an appetite right now about some of these things, which is interesting just to kind of share. But we do see this kind of happening more broadly, incrementally over the next 12 to 18 months across all industries with planning analytics as it keeps maturing and getting better. And I guess maybe Dean, in terms of like the CubeWise code, we've been talking a lot about planning analytics, which has been excellent. From a CubeWise code perspective, can you just share what we're doing there in terms of our roadmap with some of these functions, integration, with Gen AI and things like that, as it relates to the CubeWise code, Pulse and Arc products? You want to maybe share a bit about that for us, please?
Sure. Yeah. Just real quick. Like all companies, we are starting to see how we can incorporate AI into our products. And so, as an example, right now, what's available with our developer product Arc is the ability to connect to a large language model. Now, the intention is that as you're working on your rules or as you're working on your processes, what are some things that you might be able to do to enhance your code or to, maybe generate code for you? Again, it's in its infancy. This is one of those things that we are saying, how can this work for a developer to help speed development and get things going quicker? And for example, the work that Steve's doing with MDX, again, how can that be incorporated as part of our development tools? And so we are now starting to provide those connections from within that you can readily set up for yourself a key, whatever language model you wish to utilize, and start to experiment about how you might develop these tools with regards to your development activities.
And I think it's an important point. Like, as we kind of look into the CubeWise Code products, for a lot of you who are clearly aware of CubeWise, and our investment and our passion and our depth around planning analytics, which is kind of really well demonstrated through the CubeWise Code products. In terms of Pulse and Arc as an example for your I guess your developer productivity tools. Your Slice, which is your Excel add-in, which is can be looked at as a substitute for maybe Pathwave, and of course there's the Power Connect integration with Power BI, and the TM1py, which is more of on the open source side of things, but that's been a game changer, right? So we're going to continue to see from our side, as Dean was saying, investment into our technologies to help developers, as an example, be more productive, to get into more high value activities, and automation of a lot of the tasks that I know that I used to do when I was a developer. Personally, I think that's really welcome. So you can get into more high value and bigger use cases, bigger integration points, more, and again help to increase the user adoption of planning analytics across your organization, and we want to help you in that journey, which is really good.
And I'd also add, I mentioned the developer product, Arc, but we have our own Excel add-in Slice, and again, this is still utilizing that same connectivity capability, but utilizing your Excel interface to generate your reports based upon your planning analytics data is on our roadmap and is currently being worked through now. So again, just the continuation of generating the information, providing it in an interface that your users can embrace.
Yeah, good call out there. Good call out. All right, folks, I think we're kind of going to start wrapping up here and looking ahead. Just kind of start looking ahead to kind of tomorrow and then Friday. But Jason, anything you want to kind of like say here just to wrap up the AI chat before I kind of close it out?
Yeah, just briefly. I don't think it was mentioned yet. CubeWise is offering low risk proofs of concept for this, which by the way have been taken off quite significantly recently. So if interested, feel free to reach out any way you can. And I would say that this does have a lot of promise. Both CubeWise and IBM are making a lot of investment into Gen AI in our tools and their tools. And so definitely keep an eye open. This is definitely something that's moving quickly.
Yeah, well said. And I was just kind of looking at the chat, and good to see. Thanks, Andrew Layton, for kind of putting in some chat, the links to those webinars. Great to see you on the line, and Luke as well from our Belgium team. Thanks for putting in the comment there around the AI assistant impact analysis. The screen grab he's got there is references that the chart analysis that we were talking about, which is the better part of the Planning Analytics AI assistant, right? So some of those chart analytics that it is providing, as Luke is kind of referencing there in the chat, is the kind of the upside of the product, while the actual chat kind of interaction is areas where it needs to mature. But again, we kind of maybe for ourselves here, kind of more with a bit more of an advanced engineering hat on, kind of lean towards more of a what's an X approach when you want to give consideration to what is the enterprise doing, where you've deployed planning analytics, the scalability, and just the product maturity as well with Watson X is definitely ahead of the game. I'll say that. Excellent. Okay, so just to wrap up, I want to say a big thank you for everyone who attended today's session. As I said, the recording will be shortly shared with yourselves and everybody else, and again shortly uploaded to our YouTube page. And so yeah, again, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the chat, the questions. There's been great engagement there, so thank you. And there's a few things there we'll follow up on as well. As Jason said, please reach out to your local office if you're interested in taking a step further here. You would really love to kind of, as people who are very passionate, enthusiastic about this type of topics, would love to kind of engage with you in a further discussion, proof of concept, et cetera, to kind of help you and extend the value and reach of planning analytics and it's amazing data within your organization. So yeah, please reach out and let's have a chat. And again, just as a final plug, tomorrow, Steve, you and I will be on the mic with Guido and Nicholas from the engineering team. So we'll be kind of talking about high performance testing and tuning of your models, talking about architecture. Any plug there you want to provide for tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about it. It's one of James's favorite topics and therefore has become one of my favorite topics. And so we have, as you mentioned, Nico and Guido out there, and they're very excited to come and talk about some of the new product approaches we have, for instance, in Test Hub, but then also some of the cool innovation we've had over the past year or so on some of the performance capabilities that you can get out of your model. So very excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good. We're going to have like Nicholas talking about RushTI Pro, which is the advancement of RushTI, which a lot of you are already using. We're making it faster, which is fantastic, and we'd love to kind of show you that, and again, kind of put that into proof of concepts, demonstrate that value. Nicholas is going to kind of be charting out how, kind of showing the performance improvements here that are coming with this. So that's tomorrow, and then on Friday, as I said, we're going to kind of wrap it up with the big Atmosphere launch. Marius is going to be joining us, which is going to be fantastic, and we're going to be going through a number of demonstrations with him, integrating with, I think it's Snowflake and Databricks from memory, and kind of going through that and how that works architecturally, and diving deep into Atmosphere as our kind of pre-built connector solution. So that's the and that will wrap up the week. So again, just to kind of say thanks again for everyone for joining today. Thanks for the great engagement. Thanks, Steve, in particular, for the presentation, and thanks for Dean and Jason as well. Great to have you on board. And with that, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Appreciate it.
Thank you.